Thank you very much. So, thank you. I know you have a busy day, and I know I'm only around for roughly another 70 days or so in this role, although I'll continue to be around generally after that, although no one will pay much attention to me anymore. I wanted to come here today, in some respects, to say something very similar, which is I am so grateful for the partnership and the relationship and the dialogue and the work that our administration had a chance to share with all of you. I tell people all the time that a job like this, if you actually pay attention, is probably one of the greatest opportunities for growth ever, because you spend so much time listening, sometimes talking, but mostly listening to people whose life experiences are completely different than your own. And my mother and father always used to say that you learn a lot more by shutting the F up and listening than you learn by blowing your own horn. And I've tried pretty hard to model that, and I absolutely believe that many people in our administration, who we stole from you, delivered on that as well. And I do have to say that, you know, is Crystal here, by the way? All right, then I can talk about her. All right. So I did meet Crystal at that board meeting, and she gave me her card, and she said, you should come visit. And I carried it around for a while, and I was up and down Blue Hill Ave a bunch of times going to different events, and I was coming away from the Dimmock Center, which I've been involved with for 30 years. And I was on Blue Hill Ave, and I remembered that Urban Edge's office was on Jackson Square up Blue Hill Ave. And so I just went and I knocked on the door, and I walked in, and nobody had a clue who I was. And I said, I'm here to see, is Crystal here? Because she invited me, said I could come anytime. And she was there, and we talked for about an hour. And I stopped there almost every time I went past Jackson Square for the next 5 or 6 months. And then, by some miracle, actually, the reason we won that election, Karen Polito and I, was Worcester County. We lost the rest of Massachusetts by 3,000 votes, and we won Worcester County by 47,000 votes. And the lieutenant governor, who's from Worcester County, has never let me forget that. But the first appointment we made was Steve Kadish, who became chief of staff, who's a Democrat, who actually voted for Don Berwick in the primary. But I've known him for 30 years, and I knew he'd be a great chief of staff. And the second person we announced was Jay Ash to be Secretary of Housing and Economic Development because of all the wonderful work he'd done in Chelsea. And I talked to Jay, and I said, do you know Crystal Cornegay? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I think she'd be really great at DHCD. Could you, meet with her, talk to her, and see what you think? So he did, and he liked her and loved her just as much as I did, and offered her the job. And so you're Crystal. You have a very good job at an organization you really like with a whole bunch of people you adore. And some big, white, waspy Republican who's been driving up and down Blue Hill Ave offers you this chance, but at the same time, you don't know him at all, and you have no idea what the experience might be like, and you have all kinds of people around you who are saying, why would you go work for that guy? And I just want you to know that Crystal's decision to take this leap of faith, which is what it was, and to come work in our administration as the head of DHCD, and now I think you all know she runs mass housing, was an incredible act of generosity on her part, for which I am enormously grateful. Because a lot of people in that situation would have said no. Why leave the comfort and the relationships that I've built and developed in Jackson Square to go take a flyer with this guy I know nothing about other than he keeps knocking on my door, right? And I believe that one of the things that makes me most glad about my time in this role, especially through the course of the pandemic, has been the incredible generosity that so many people have shown, not just to our administration, but to one another. And I was on a phone call every Tuesday night early in the pandemic, sort of all the way from like March of 20 through the end of the year, when there was still just an enormous amount of fear and trepidation and tragedy and all sorts of other things going on. And the call was Tuesday night at 8, and the reason it was at 8 because it was 8 on the East Coast and it was 5 on the West Coast. And you never knew how many governors were there on the call, because the only way you would know if a governor was on was because they introduced themselves and started talking. It's like a party line. But what it really was therapy for all of us to have this chance, who were all sitting in the same kind of seat, to talk about what was going on. And I would get off that call and I would say to my wife, Lauren, I am so glad that I'm the governor of Massachusetts. Because here, when you ask people for help, they raise their hand. When you're looking to do something to expand your food pantries, people raise their hand. When you're looking to come up with a strategy to deal with housing and evictions, people raise their hand. Time and time again, people in Massachusetts, throughout the course of that very difficult period, stood up for each other and were kind to their neighbors and supported their communities and partnered with people were creating organizations out of the air to do testing programs and vaccine programs and all the rest. And when you're living in the middle of that, I'm not sure you really see what's actually going on. But I had a front row seat for it. And people here were so good to each other in ways that they just weren't in other parts of the country. And I can say that because I was on this call every single week and I heard what was going on in a lot of other states. And the thing I'm going to take away when all is said and done from the past 8 years, and it's a big part of why I wanted to be here, is how grateful I am to have had a chance to grow and to learn and to work with so many of you. And you know, when someone says to me at the end of the day, what do you regret, what are you sorry about, and all the rest, one of the things I'm going to say is I didn't get enough effing money for housing. And you know, we asked for $300 million for first-time home buyers coming out of that book, right? For communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic. And we got 60, and that's a start. And that 60 is currently, I think most of you probably know, that program is just getting started. And we asked for another 250 million for the Commonwealth Builders Program. We got 150, but that gets built on top of the program we started, and that one is going to eventually become a piece of the drill, I believe, here in Massachusetts and play a bigger role. But there's no question that the home ownership piece in particular is an enormous stain on this country's history, and the only way to fix it is to step up to the plate, put the resources in place, and give people the opportunities that they were denied to own a home. Because let's face it, in America, that is where wealth gets built. And I want you all to know that I so admire the work you do. I'm such a fan of who you are and what you're about and what you stand for. And if after I'm done with this day job I've got now, it's possible for me to play a role in some way with you going forward, I would be honored to have the opportunity to do that. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Joe.